Hi, my name is John Sluter. This is the third in a short series about the Bible and human sexuality. The Song of Songs is a short book, 8 chapters, but each of those chapters is about the longing and the desire of a man and a woman for each other. These poems, or this poem, celebrate romantic love. So I cannot read the Song of Songs and accept that the Judeo-Christian family of religions is somehow against romance. Indeed, the patriarchs of Israel all had wives. And although we know that Christ and Paul chose to be celibate, other apostles did have wives. Peter, we know, was married. Some of the prophets, Jeremiah, for example, was commanded not to marry, but we know that Isaiah, certainly no slouch as a prophet, had a wife whom he esteemed highly. He called her the prophetess. When I was thinking about that earlier, I remembered a quip by the late, great Frederick Buechner. He said that there's no biblical record of any prophet being invited to dinner twice. But somehow, I know he was tongue-in-cheek, and somehow I think that the table, Isaiah's table and his wife's table, could be very companionable. Because the thing that distinguishes prophets is their closeness to God, and that means their likeness to God, and that means the love of God dwells in them. And part of that love, for at least some of the prophets, was a deep love for their spouse. Jonathan Winthrop, as I recall, was a governor of Pennsylvania, an early colonial leader in any case. And he said something about society. He said that liberty without order is anarchy, and order without liberty is tyranny. What is needed is a system of ordered liberty. It's something like that. And I think that could be adopted as the ideal attitude, a biblical attitude toward romance. That is, it's a good thing. It's a very good thing. Sometimes it's a very needful thing. But romance without constraints is a very bad thing. And the confines of romance biblically are the confines of marriage, and it should not take place outside of those confines. And I can point to, in support of that, for example, I think it's the 21st, the penultimate chapter of Revelation that describes the people that do not enter heaven. And among those are the impure, and sometimes that's translated as fornicators, that is, those who have sex outside of the bounds of marriage. And Paul said that it's better to marry than to burn. And the fact that there was this dichotomous choice, either marriage or burning, suggests that there was no middle ground. You couldn't not marry, but you couldn't, avoid marriage by simply quenching the burning by having a lot of one-night stands. It's a dichotomous choice, according to Paul. Marry or burn, and it's better to marry than to burn. Jesus Christ spoke about his hatred of divorce, and he said that if one marries and divorces and then remarries, that's adultery. And people hearing him said, well, if that's true, then isn't it better not to marry? And he said that some people have that gift, that is the gift of celibacy. Again, it's this dichotomous choice, marriage or celibacy. The point being that suggests strongly that sex outside of marriage is out of the question. In Genesis, Judah, one of the patriarchs, his wife has died, and he sees what he thinks is a roadside prostitute, and he decides to assuage his loneliness with her. There's a plot twist there that I won't get into, but that ends up being embarrassing and humiliating to him, and he has to confess that extramarital tryst was sinful. And I would even go so far as to say in Genesis, the fact that the devil acted through a snake-like character, a serpent-like character, gives the story of the fall of humanity, a certain Freudian edge that suggests that sexuality needs to be cabined if that was the original sin, the sin from which all other sins flowed. Now that's countercultural, everything I've just said. That is, modern society, and from what I can tell of European society based upon the detective television shows that I enjoy watching from Denmark, do not accept that there's something innately wrong with sex outside of the bounds of marriage. And I accept that what I'm saying is going to startle some. I'm going to try to explain it. Explain why it's a good thing to abstain except in marriage. Why it's a good thing that people who are married should not act like they are not married, and people who are not married should not act like they are married. Romance creates vulnerability. You become vulnerable to the other person because a bond is created. And why would one want to become vulnerable to a person that one was not committed to for life? Because at least when there is that lifelong commitment, there is a strong tendency to take care of the other person, to not use that vulnerability against them, to use that vulnerability, if anything, to hopefully make them, as time goes by, a better person, a stronger person, a person more grounded in the confidence that they are loved and loved forever. Obviously, this is a fallen world. Obviously, even in a marriage, that can break down. But that should be the goal of every marriage, and is not attainable where that commitment does not exist. So that's one thing. Now, one can go to the other side. One can so harden one's heart that the act of romance becomes something that's just very situational and temporary, and then one just moves on, and that's the understanding. But I would submit that degrades the other person in one's eyes. And when I have experience with people who have been in that situation, and once they realize that they were disposable, like a soda bottle that was thrown away after it was used, after the soda was gone, it harms a person. And I think that even that attitude toward other persons by somebody who's fully ready to walk away from any romantic situation after having enjoyed it degrades that person as well, They think less of human beings. They value human beings less than they should. And that's ultimately detrimental to them, to their temporary partner, and to society generally. Human beings were meant to be cherished, cherished by God, cherished by their neighbors, cherished by their partners. And it seems to me that casual sex goes the other way, keeps people from being cherished, and sets a ceiling, a low ceiling on the heights that romance can achieve. I cannot see the kind of romance, the kind of love, the kind of excitement, the kind of longing, that wonder about romance existing with that we find in the Song of Songs existing in a society or among persons where sex becomes casual. Now, those are as good of explanations as I can give, except for saying one thing. Sin separates us from God. And we know from the scriptural witness that casual sex outside of marriage, is sin. It makes no sense to indulge in something so temporary and forfeit something as enduring and wonderful as the eternal banquet with God that is promised to those who lay hold of the salvation freely offered and cling to it and strive toward it for as long as they live. And I guess the final thing I want to say is that I'm not really here to tell people to abstain from sex. I'm here to tell people to strive for the better thing. I'm here to tell them on this earth, if they choose to strive for a marriage and a romance that lasts as long as you live, not as a lesser choice, but as a greater choice, as something better than a series of temporary one-night stands. And beyond that, to strive for union with God as early as you can and for as long as you can. We will sin and we will fail, and God can break through our sin, and God is patient. Not infinitely patient, but divinely patient. And that's what we should strive for, that union with God, whether we choose to marry or not to marry. We should strive for the union of God, for that great banquet that lasts forever. The next series I plan, the next video in this series, is about what God does to help us to live the life that He calls us to live. What God does to make it possible to be the partner in a marriage that we are called to be when we marry.